Have you ever thought how communication within prisons is different from the outside community? The adaptation that inmates have within prisons is a learning process in order for the inmates to rehabilitate. Even though inmates are confined, communication is as important to their world as to ours. First, I will explain how the prisoners use language to connect to the other inmates. We all know that the language within prisons is unique in its own way. In class, we learned about convergence, meaning that the inmates try to match the styles of communication with the others in prison. Such as the word con became part of the prison lingo in 1888 to define the inmates who they are. It is just a shorter meaning of the word convict. In an article named Language and Communication in Prison, the author had stated that the language within the prisons is helpful to the inmates to connect with one another. The whole purpose for inmates to have that prison language is for it to be a symbol for the prison community. This gives the convicts an identity of them being an outcast. Prisoners have up to 20,000 to 50,000 words in their prison lingo, such as all day and all night means life without parole, and when it comes to the words, they use the word ching check, meaning to punch another inmate in the jaw to see if they will fight back. Given the example I have provided, this is just an insight of how prisoners communicate amongst each other. It necessarily doesn't have to be spoken, but it can be written as well and explained in an article that is named Prison Lingo. When written, it's not written in the English format. It is written in codes such as drawings, numbers, slang words, and symbols. Now that I have explained to you the unique way of language within prisons, this is bringing me to my next topic. And now I will explain how prisoners use language to distance themselves from the guards. In class, we learned about the term divergent, meaning that communication that prisoners have is to push away the guards in order for them not to understand the inmates. The way this can become dangerous is for the guards if they end up becoming targets, even without them even knowing. The inmates can send the other inmates to have a hit on a guard by causing them intentional harm. Guards try to decode messages that inmates have with one another in order to prevent any harm from happening. For example, an article named 50 Prison Slang Words has shown that 3 knee deep means to stab a guard but not to kill them. Guards are able to tell when inmates are upset, whether it is through body language or the way they communicate with the guards. In addition, guards have their way of communicating with the inmates as well. They have 4 ways of communication within the correctional facility. This is explained in an article, Communication in Today's Correctional Facilities. 1 is no communication, where the guards and the inmates don't talk. The guards just point to where they're supposed to do and they go on their way. This is an example of nonverbal communication. The reason behind this is that communication isn't misinterpreted between the inmates and the guards. Operational communication is just the bare minimum of communication. It's just a few words exchanged with the guards and the inmates. It's more of a command using such as do this or go there. After explained, now I will bring you to the 3rd way they communicate. Humans respect is where the guards talk to the inmates like they would talk to someone on the street. For example, a family member or a stranger out in public. Cognitive reflection communication is where the guards want the inmates to change their attitude, and this is the hardest form of communication to have with an inmate, because some of the inmates have different perspectives of the demands that the guards give. Since some of the inmates aren't willing to change their attitude, and things can escalate. All the guards want is to have a safe environment for the guards and the inmates. Even though there's many ways of communicating with the inmates, as long as with the guards, they all have the same purpose. Communication is important no matter where or who we are. It's important to them as it is important to us because it's the way of survival when confined.